There's not a lot recorded about the long history of this site. It was, as the sign says at the beginning of the park, it was part of a large 1,000-acre tract of land owned by William Preston. And that land was probably in agricultural use for a long period of time. And then probably the 1970s, it was owned by a private owner, and development had begun in the surrounding area in the neighborhoods. The park was fallow then. It was sparsely vegetated, but a lot of debris had been dumped in here from industrial sites and from the construction development. It wasn't until 1988 that the park was deeded to the city by the owner, Robert Mays, at that time. And so it became a city park in the late 1980s. My name's Jerry Weisenfluh, and I'm the key steward of Preston Cave Spring Park here on the west side of Lexington. I didn't become involved in the park until about 2018. In fact, I didn't even know this park existed in Lexington, and I live about 2 miles away. So this is not a very well-known park in the city. Every year, the Friends of Wolf Run and the Lexington Environmental Commission hold a stream cleanup here in the spring, and I attended one of those, and that's the first time I got to see the park. And at the time, I was working at a couple of other sites doing honeysuckle removal and stream restoration work. So I knew a little bit about that, and I could see when I visited this park that there was work that still needed to be done to remove invasive plants. And so I asked the leaders at the park at the time if there was work going on, and turns out there wasn't. And so they told me if I wanted to do some work at the park, I would be on my own, and I would work with the city parks people to get permission to enter the park and do the work. So I began working by myself, I think it was 2018, and just began removing small honeysuckle plants near the stream. And then within a year, there was interest expressed by other individuals, and so I started building a volunteer crew here, and we've been working for about the last 3 or 4 years removing invasive plants. It was clear when I started that this wasn't the first time that restoration had gone on here, and I've talked to individuals since then and learned that there have been at least 2 other restoration, sort of intensive restoration efforts at the park. A gentleman named John Walker and his wife Roberta did one of the first ones, and this was probably in the 1990s, and they worked for some period of time. And then there was a second effort done, and this was probably in the 2006 timeframe. And at that time, there were still a lot of industrial debris, car engines, large culvert pipes, and things of that sort. So there was a lot of really heavy work done to remove some of those items from the park, as well as cutting honeysuckle and hauling it out of the park. And so there's been a lot of work done. Usually these efforts would last for 4 or 5 years, and then for one reason or another, those projects would come to an end, and the honeysuckle would regrow again in the park. Well, we're removing invasive plants here, and the 2 main ones that are involved are bush honeysuckle, which are large woody plants, and then winter creeper, which is a ground cover that's found throughout the park. The problem with dealing with the honeysuckle is that there was so much of it here, and the plants are so large that there's a lot of debris that has to be dealt with. And because of the configuration and the elevation of the park, we can't bring in equipment easily to chip the wood into piles and use it on paths. And we can't haul it out of the park to have it taken away. And so we have to deal with this debris on site. And because the work areas are often quite narrow and small, it becomes a challenge to find places to put the debris while we continue working on other plants. Well, the second plant that we're dealing with, called winter creeper, is a low-growing ground cover kind of plant. A lot of people would see it and think it's an ivy, but this is an invasive plant. It covers the flora of the park, and like the honeysuckle, it inhibits the growth of the natural plants that we would want to occur in this area. So in most restoration projects of this kind, removal of winter creeper is not feasible. It's too labor intensive once it gets established. But our observation here was that it was really impeding the progress of the work, because the new plants that we put in the ground did not have high survival rates because they couldn't compete well with the winter creeper. So a couple of years ago, we decided to try to make an effort to remove winter creeper as we proceeded through the area. And we've had reasonably good success with that in areas where it wasn't well developed. It's really labor-intensive work, and it's slowed our progress down. And so it's a big challenge, but it's one that really enhances the park if we can get it done. I think people that I've met who work in stream restoration and woodland restoration all come from different backgrounds and have different motivations, but all of them like to get out in the woods. It's a peaceful place. And so I think that anybody who likes to get out of the house and enjoy nature would enjoy working in one of these parks doing this kind of work.